Hello everyone. One of my viewers asked me why I haven't talked about the Feyachi M37 Magnifier in a while, right? It seems like I do a whole bunch of videos. A lot of times I have magnifiers on the guns, and they usually either Holosuns or Vortexes. Over the winter I had done a bunch of videos on this where I was testing it, reviewing it, but he's noticed that this is not the magnifier that I use, right? I use one of the other ones. So he was wondering why. Okay, so that's a very fair question. Okay, this is a 1.5 to 5 variable magnifier, right? So you turn the ring here and it goes from 1.5 to 5. So you would think that that would be like an added bonus. But here's the thing: if you look over here, the optic that I'm using is a Holosun, and most of the time I am using Holosuns. Okay. The one that I had, or one of the ones I had tested this with over the winter, was a Feyachi, which was dot only, and basically there's, I like using either circle dots, or even more, I like using red dots or optics that have the ACSS reticle, okay, which has a built-in bullet drop compensator, right? So that really, especially with the when paired up with the magnifier, it's really useful for shooting at distance. So the point here is that most of the time I'm using these Holosuns, and the first issue you run into is a height issue. Okay, if you look over here, right, you will see that the height of the optic is a little bit higher than the height of the magnifier. Now, when I look through here, the way I see that is I see a little bit more scope shadow. Okay, so if I look through this one here, all right, so same thing over here. When I look through this one, there's no scope shadow. Because it's the magnifier and the optic are in perfect line. Okay, so that's a 3x. Even with the 6x, you go, this one here is a 6x. When I look through this Vortex, okay, so I see much less scope shadow. There's usually going to be a little bit more scope shadow with the 6x than the 3x, but not by much as I move my head back and forth. But definitely with this one over here, when I look through it, there's a very thick shadow around the edges. Okay, no matter where I put my head, if I flip this off to the side and I look through it, yeah, there's now much less scope shadow. There's still some scope shadow there, but the main issue here is these two are not matched up. So when I'm looking through here, I'm not actually, my eyeballs are not centered on the optic. Okay, so that creates a scope shadow. So it's still workable, but it's there, and it's a reason why I would prefer to use one of the others. Okay, now with the Holosun and the Vortex magnifiers, they have these spacers over here so that you can adjust the height. Okay, so that there's a piece in there that comes out. Let me get behind the camera, make sure it's in focus. Yeah, so you can see right there, there's a spacer in there that I've added to bring this up to height. Same thing here with the Holosun. Okay, if I open this up, there's a spacer in there to adjust the height. Okay, so with the Feyachi, what Feyachi does is they've got this locking mechanism here where you got to push down to basically it locks into position, so you can't just quickly flip it off. So because of this locking mechanism, they can't put a spacer here. They would have to incorporate it somehow into the base. So the height is not adjustable on the Feyachi. Okay. Now, one of the things to just be aware of is that even with the spacers, a lot of times when you're mixing and matching different companies, they can still be slightly off. Okay, it just so happens that, well, obviously the Holosun is going to match up perfectly with their optics, right? Because they designed it that way. But the Vortex 6X by coincidence also matches up pretty perfectly with the Holosun, okay? So again, it makes it a lot easier to work with. I see less scope shadow. So, you know, if I'm just going to be doing some shooting, that's where basically I just need a magnifier. I'm not looking to test it. I just want what's going to be the easiest to work with, the most comfortable to work with. I'm going to grab one that's going to give me the least amount of scope shadow, okay? Now, I did mention this locking mechanism here, okay? So you would think that that's a plus, but it's actually a pain in the ass for me, okay? Because every time I want to, you know, I got to press this button. Now you might say, what's the big deal? Why can't I just press the button? Well, if you think about it, a lot of times when I'm getting into position, right? So I'm in the sling. Because a lot of times I got to travel to my position. Okay, so I'm in the sling over here. So I get into position. I got to let this out, swing my arm out, deploy the legs. Okay. Okay. Flip off the magnifier, right? Because I want to get on my target. You know, basically I get on target without the magnifier. Once I get into target, I'm looking at it and I just basically push up to get that magnification. So with all this other work I got to do, and also trying to stay on target, reaching in here to push that button, it's you know what, it's a pain. It's, you know, it's an extra step I really don't need. It's a lot easier for me to get on target and then flip this up, take my shots, you know, flip this off, you know, and then if I, you know, move to my next position. Okay, so that pressing in to unlock it makes a big deal, right? It's because again, a lot of times I'm doing these drills when I'm going from position to position. This whole deal here, where are you? This deal of pushing this to unlock it, it's just an annoying little thing, and especially if you're shooting prone, right? If you know, because now prone you can be on uneven ground. So now you're reaching up, you got to press this. A lot of times there's a conflict between the optic and the you know, and this button over here, especially if I'm using a larger optic like this. All right, let's put this on here for a second. Now, here's the other thing that annoys me, okay? With these optics, if I want to take this off, this has a quick detach. Push the button, take this off, move it to a different gun. Really easy, okay? So, the thing that's annoying here now is they don't have a quick detach, right? So they gotta, basically I gotta get an Allen key or something, because I use an Allen key to torque this, and I gotta go find something to untorque it with, so I can move it to the other gun. Hold on for a second, I'm gonna go get a tool, right? So now I need a tool. All right, so I did not plan this for some kind of effect. It's just I forgot to bring the tool out, right? So now I gotta use a tool. I gotta put this in here, untorque this a little bit. Okay, take this off, put this on here. Yeah, so I'm having an issue with this button hitting the back of this. There you go. Okay, so I got that in position. Now I gotta take that tool, which I may have lost if I'm in the woods, and tighten this up. So first problem you see here is that it's not lined up. Okay, it's a little bit. Now I do have this one actually has a spacer here. I could remove the spacer, and I think I had tried it and I actually dropped it. It wasn't centered either. I think it might have been too low when I took out this spacer, right? So that's one of the issues that you run into when you're mixing and matching magnifiers and optics from different companies. They all have a different idea of what absolute co-witness is and what you know, lower 1/3 co-witness is. You know, I mean, yeah, usually absolute co-witness is 2.5 inches, height over bore. Lower 1/3 is 2 3/4 inches, but they might be off like a tiny little fraction or whatever. But anyway, if I'm looking here through this, so now because of the reflex, I do not see scope shadow. Okay, so it does work up. I do see a little bit of the line over here. So I do see a flat bottom, right? So there's no scope shadow, but I do see the flat bottom. Okay, and I think that, you know, one of the things I've noticed is with the Feyachi, when I'm looking at distance, it does seem to be a little bit, just a tiny little bit less clear. Not a whole lot, just a tiny little bit. And that might just be because it's always off center. But anyway, now, as far as flipping this on and off, you can see how that button and this magnifier, I mean, it's kind of really tight in there, right? I gotta kind of get my finger in there. And that's going to be even harder if you're in a prone position to try to get to that. So that's just extra work I do not need, okay? I do not need that extra work. And a lot of times, here, let's close this up. Yeah, a lot of times I'll be in this position. I'll flip this around, let this out. I want to come up on target. I want to, you know, do some observation, come off, right? So I want to be able to work fast with this, on and off. Because usually I want it like this, but a lot of times if I'm flipping it over my back, because I don't want this hitting stuff, I'll close it, throw this over my back, tighten it up, okay? This is the Brash Tactical Sling. For me, it's like the best sling. They don't sell them anymore. I've tried the Vickers, I've tried the Magpul ones. None of them are quite as fast as this. This one is the fastest, and it was only like $17 when I got it. But you can see how it's really important for me to be able to open and close that magnifier as I'm getting in and out of positions, right? So come here, flip it around, get the magnifier off, okay? Deploy the legs, okay? Come on target, find my target, flip this on, take my shots, boom, boom. You know, then decide if I'm going to keep shooting. You know, I want to keep this off, but usually when I throw this on my back, I want to close it. So I'm doing a lot of opening and closing, So that locking mechanism is a pain in the ass, okay? So that's, you know, that's just a practicality, right? Now the other thing, which is kind of important here, if you look at this, this is a 1.525, okay? So usually, practically speaking, I'm either going to be in 1x or I'm going to go to max magnification, okay? So I'm really not messing around with the variable on a magnifier. Even on LPVOs, on scopes, usually if they're like up to 6x, a lot of times they're just second focal plane, right? Because again, most of the time you're either in 1 or you're zooming all the way up to 6. So for like a 1 to 6, it's like there's no point in spending extra money in the first focal plane. But if you've got a scope that goes up to 10, to 8 or to 10, a lot of times you might actually want to be working in 6 or 8, okay? You might want to be working in a lower magnification. So in those scopes, it makes sense for them to be first focal plane because you're actually, because you're actually working in less magnification. So with this being a 1.5 to 5, I have not, other than to just test it, like to compare this 3x to this 3x, I have never wanted to use less than the max magnification. If I want a wider field of view for observation, you just flip the damn thing off, right? Now I got that wide field of view, right? And then close this, so I go straight to max magnification. So that's the practicality of how I use it. So this being a variable 1.5 to 5, you know what? It's extra weight for no reason, right? Because this, in order to make this a variable, right? If you compare it, get this gun off. right? If you compare these two, you'll see the 1.5 here is actually larger than the 6, right? So this is the 6X here. So the 6X ends up being smaller because it doesn't have the variable function on it. Okay, so this being a variable makes it longer, makes it bigger, and it really doesn't give me a benefit, right? So that extra size and weight, there's no benefit. Okay, and the other thing here, especially if I'm shooting 300 to like 500 yards, this only goes up to 5X. Okay, rotate this up to 5X. You know why? If I know I'm going to be shooting like 500-600 yards, I'm taking the 6X. Okay, first of all, it's smaller than that 5X, and it gives me an extra magnification. Okay, so there's no reason why I would want to use this 5X when I got a perfectly good smaller 6X here, right? It has that extra magnification, lines up perfectly with the optic, right? And this one here is the ACSS, or has a built-in bullet drop compensator. And basically, when you're putting your magnifier behind a red dot that has a bullet drop compensator, it's effectively like you have a first focal plane LPVO. Okay. The benefit here is that if I want to lighten the gun, I can remove the optic. Okay. As you know, rather I can remove the magnifier versus, let's say, an LPVO. You know, you're stuck with the entire scope. You can't like remove half of an LPVO. You know, here if I need to lighten this up, okay, I now have a lighter gun, right? Take off the bipod, I got an even lighter gun. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of the magnifier versus an LPVO. I can quickly lighten up the gun. I can pass this to somebody else, or I can actually just use it by itself, right? If I don't want to point the gun at somebody, but if I want to be able to look at distance, I can remove this, observe at distance without pointing the gun in an unsafe direction, right? If we're not in a combat situation. So again, these are all benefits of the magnifier versus an LPVO. Okay, and put this down. I think I covered everything. So those are all the reasons why I generally prefer to use one of those, either the Holosun or the Vortex, you know, versus this this variable 1.5 to 5. What do you call this? Feyachi M37. Now I'll go a step beyond that, and I'll say I already did a video on this. Don't get a 3X at this point. Go straight to 6X. I have here the Vortex. I want to get the Holosun 6X. I don't have it. It's actually in my shopping cart, right, at Optics Planet. And I'm actually like considering, like, I'm trying to think, like, okay, like when do I want to pay for this? You know, do I want to pay for it now? When do I need it? When am I going to be using it? So the Holosun 6X is actually sitting in my shopping cart at Optics Planet. Okay. Now, one of the things I like about Holosun over the 6X is the quick detach here. That kind of stuff. You see how close it is to the charging handle? Actually, I put it in the wrong position. I should have put it a little bit further up. Hold on, let's fix this. But right there, it's impossible to work the charging handle. There we go. So the way this is set up, you see how that's really close to the charging handle? Okay, so that's, you know, and I have to move this a little bit up to be able to get my hand in there. With the Holosun, that's not an issue. Right, with the Holosun, these are all quick detach if my fingers are working right. There you go. Actually, I have to. The rails on this one apparently is a different size. Let's put it on this one, because the rails on these are not always the same size, thickness, and sometimes you gotta adjust it. Okay, yeah, it matches up to this one. So with this one over here, yeah, I didn't want to pull out a tool and start filling with the Allen screw on that side. So with this one over here, you see how the quick attach is like centered on the base over here. It doesn't extend past the base, so it allows me room to put a bubble level there, and plenty of room. You know, it sits flatter. Plenty of room to work the charging handle. So I do like the Holosun design better, although I've been working with the Vortex for at least the last 5 years now, and it works good. It's just that one thing I got to work around, but extremely useful. And I have no intention, I think, of ever buying another 3X. I got the intention of buying another 6X. So I think that kind of tells you, you know, how I feel about a 3X versus a 6X. 6X is a lot more practical, and like I said earlier, the way you use this is, don't even think about field of view. That's a non-issue. You flip this off, you get on your target. Once you're on target, you flip this up, take your shots, boom, boom. Flip this off, you know, and if you're going to keep shooting where you need a wider field of view, you shoot without the magnifier. Okay, so you flip it on just when you need magnification, right? You don't put the magnifier on and start searching, you know, through the magnifier. It's not going to work. Okay, so yeah, so I wanted to give an update on this Feyachi M37. Tell you guys how I feel about it. It's good. It's decent. It has better eye relief than the EOTech, right? Holosun does have more eye relief than the Feyachi, but Feyachi has more eye relief than the EOTech. So you know, so it's not bad for $80 if you're on a strict budget where all you can spend is $80, and you know you need a magnifier. Yeah, I think it's a decent deal. Okay, but for me, it's like, okay, I need the Holosun 6X. That's what I need. That's what's next on my shopping list. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do not monetize this channel. I don't get paid by anybody. So, you know, I just enjoy shooting. I'm a full-time gun instructor. The only way I get paid is by actually training people. And, you know, so basically when I make recommendations, I want people to have the best tools, right, for their training. So I'm not, you know, I sound like I get paid by this company or that company and I'm trying to push product. No, I just want the people to have the best tools. And for me, myself, who enjoy shooting, I want to have the best tools, the best budget-friendly tools, okay? So drop some comments. It helps push the algorithm, and I'll talk to y'all soon.